Hello. Perhaps you've heard the term, what cannot be measured doesn't exist. I've heard this in business mainly, but also in exercise. And it's this idea that if you cannot really measure your improvements, it's not worth it. And to me, measuring is an important tool. However, is a tool, and it should be part of many other things to consider in whatever your practice is, in this case, in our case, movement-wise. So if you only focus on how much weight that you're lifting, or how deep you're stretching, or how fast you're running, then you might fall into the trap of forgetting the how you do things, which is incredibly important, maybe even more important than the actual result. So there's always this risk of forgetting yourself, looking for this goal, and then leading yourself, for example, into injuries, into some overused physical compensations, and why not? So instead, I offer you to always consider the how. Exercise-wise, it's about how you organize your body, being aware of your breath, making sure you are addressing the proper areas and not compensating with others, not overusing certain areas or underusing others. And then you also consider and measure your progress, but always making sure whatever you're doing it in the right way. Also, there is this idea of how many things we do cannot really be measured and yet are very important. Perhaps movement-wise, there's a lot, infinitely more movement that cannot be measured and yet are very important. Also, like in other areas of your life, you cannot measure things like kindness, for example. How do you measure being a better human? So this is something to consider, that it's not just about how much money you have in the bank, how much weight you are back squatting, or your fat percentage, etc., etc. So those are factors that might be important in taking in considerations, but let's not forget the big picture. Things like the how, things like the unknown, things like all these things that make your experience better, even though there are not a number attached to them. Thank you for listening.